We are in a battle for the soul of America.
This is a fraud on the American public.
Welcome to After America. I'm Dr. Emma Shortis, Director of International and Security Affairs at the Australia Institute. It is midnight here in DC, officially Election Day. I've just gotten back from Philadelphia, where I lined up for a few hours in a failed attempt to get into Kamala Harris's last big campaign rally. I can't remember ever seeing a line that long. We walked for maybe 20 minutes just to find the end of it, and then we waited for maybe 2 hours or so as people streamed past us as the end of the line just kept getting further and further away. I say we because I was actually tagging along with the ABC's Matt Bevan, host of If You're Listening. On the train, on the way back, Matt and I had a chat about what it was like being there in Philadelphia, his experiences last week in Michigan, and how much we don't know about what might happen today. Here's Matt now. So we are on the train back from Philadelphia to DC, and I'm sitting here with the ABC's one and only Matt Bevan, who I tagged along with to try unsuccessfully and get into Kamala Harris's probably last big rally before Election Day. So we waited in line for a good couple of hours and didn't get anywhere near the front, gave up and went and had some dinner. Now we're on the train back. So Matt, I guess first thing, even though we didn't get in, we talked to a lot of people, you talked to a lot of people in the line. What's your take on the rally? How did you find it?
I mean, one of the interesting things from this rally and from many discussions with Democrats, I think, is that they don't trust their own feelings. I've no idea how to count what we saw there. It was an extraordinary queue that was bending around back on itself and running out of room to queue. Kind of, it was sort of making a snail, sort of a spiral shell in on itself, and struggling to figure out exactly where it could go from there. I've no idea how to count how many people there, but the enthusiasm of these people seemed to indicate, and I think to a lot of the people in the crowd, that this was a good news. There was a lot of people there. It was a lot of enthusiasm for Kamala Harris in a city that she needs massive turnout in order to win the election, almost certainly. The winner of Pennsylvania is very likely to be the winner of the election, and the route to victory for her goes through Philadelphia, and here are all these people on a Monday afternoon gridlocking the CBD of Philadelphia. And yet when I talked to them, and a couple of them acknowledged this to me, they said, it looks pretty good, but I don't trust my own vibe, my own ability to judge the vibes. And so, yeah, it's that was the thing of all the people. And I mean, that's the thing, because, I was at a Trump rally last week and the queue was much, 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 much smaller. And my political instinct would be to say that, that queue was in Detroit and this queue was in Philadelphia. My instinct would be to say that Kamala Harris looks like she's got massive amounts of support in key areas. But previous experience has meant that I, and obviously all of those Democrats in that line, don't really trust our own feelings and don't really trust the vibes anymore, which is interesting. Anyway.
It sure is interesting. And that was certainly the impression I got, that everybody was including us, I think, was overawed by how many people were there, but that the Americans who were there weren't really willing to kind of look in the eye what that might mean for Harris and the level of support that she's got, particularly in Pennsylvania. I'm interested in, all right, so I was in Charlotte in North Carolina, and the crowd was overwhelmingly women, and it kind of made me think that women's turnout is going to be crucial in this election, and that that's maybe something that's being dramatically underestimated.
It's mostly female, isn't it? Mostly women in the queue today.
Is your sense that polls might, I know it's an unfair question, but that polls might be underestimating women's turnout in particular, or that the polls are skewed somehow?
Well, I mean, that certainly is what Nate Silver thinks, and I don't necessarily trust everything that Nate Silver says, but he presents some interesting evidence in a recent post that he's put out that the likelihood of all of these polls being so, when I say close, I don't mean 50-50, I mean so close to each other. So many polls presenting with the same result of basically 50-50 or 49-51, either way, for months and months and months at a time. There should be more variation in the results of these polls. And he's saying basically that that is an indication that the pollsters are deliberately pulling outliers back to the centre by, tinkering with, crosstabs and the weighting of various demographics in order to try and pull things back to the centre, because they're worried about being an outlier, and they think that being an outlier could potentially, lead to embarrassment. They'd rather stick with the pack in the middle where nobody can claim that they were wildly wrong one way or another. And basically what that means is that the polls are useless. The polls not only can't be trusted, but they don't tell us anything at all.
Matt, is the risk of that, though, given, I think you're better placed than almost anyone to comment on this, given what Trump is doing in laying the groundwork for election conspiracy and this narrative that the election has been stolen, is the risk that potential skewing of the polls plays exactly into Trump's hands in the aftermath of the election? What do you think the risks are there?
Well, I mean, I think polls showing a big Trump lead would certainly be very helpful for Donald Trump when it comes to, if he isn't leading in the vote totals as the count comes out, claiming victory and saying, well, look, the polls indicated that I should be winning by so much more, and so that means that then something must be up, which is an argument that he made in 2020 quite erroneously. So saying it's a tied race, I don't know that it necessarily assists him all that much. But, there is some discussion about whether there are partisan pollsters out there, people who are deliberately putting out positive polls for Donald Trump, both to assist his fundraising and his campaigning, but also to assist any potential claims of voter fraud following the election, which is something that, all indications are that Donald Trump is likely to lean into following Election Day.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you make in that context of his increasingly violent rhetoric, or what seems like increasingly violent rhetoric in the last week or so, particularly around, his comments around Liz Cheney and the press as well? Do you think that is a ratcheting up, or is that just more people paying attention to the same kind of language that he usually uses?
I think, it's hard to tell what's a deliberate strategy and what's the fact that Donald Trump is, understandably exhausted after 2 years of campaigning, and really 9 years of campaigning, but 2 years of intense campaigning. And, today he's done 4 rallies, which is, would be extremely difficult for anyone, let alone someone who likes to speak for an hour and a half at each rally. And so, whether it's a deliberate strategy, whether people are noticing it more, I'm not sure. But I think the more interesting comments from Donald Trump are around his insistence that election results must come and be declared in the first few hours after polls close. Meanwhile, Steve Bannon, who's recently been released from prison, has said that in the last election, Donald Trump declared victory after 2 o'clock in the morning. He thinks that was a mistake and that Donald Trump should be declaring victory at 11 o'clock at night. And so Trump and Bannon appear to be aligned on this. And so we could see that situation where Trump claims victory at around 11 o'clock At night, which would be sort of around mid-afternoon East Coast time in Australia, which would be a very dangerous thing. And this coupled with Donald Trump's promises in the past to pardon people who rioted on January 6th may potentially give his supporters the confidence to go out and intimidate or potentially be violent against, not necessarily against Democrats, but against election officials.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my kind of understanding of it is that Trump this time around has less to lose than he did last time, in terms of, he kind of desperately wants the presidency for a number of reasons, one of which is staying out of jail. And so he has less to lose in the aftermath. And his supporters, kind of in an apparent contradiction, have more to lose because they've invested so much more in him since then. They've gone all in, particularly the high-profile supporters.
That's one of the incredible things, is these high-profile people like Elon Musk, particularly Elon Musk, who was the CEO of multiple massive companies that have enormous, that rely massively on having close relationships with the US government. For him to endorse either candidate to the extent that he has done so with Donald Trump, and come out and attend rally, speak at Donald Trump's rallies, and fund get out the vote programs for Donald Trump. It's, I would have thought a massive risk for him personally and a risk for his companies that potentially, if Donald Trump doesn't win the election, then could potentially massively backfire on him in terms of his ability to continue to run his companies. And it's an extraordinary decision and a massive risk for him, and baffling to me that he would go to the extent that he has in on a candidate in a race where the polls indicate that it is so close. Although I did just say that don't trust the polls, but it's difficult to discern really what the result is going to be. It could be a landslide in either direction. It is a toss-up race, I guess, is the thing. But because we don't know what the actual feeling among the public is.
And I think that, to emphasise that, we don't know, we've spent time in the United States talking to people, and if anything, I don't know about you, but I feel even less certain about what's going to happen in the next couple of days.
This is my first time, not in the United States, but the first time in the United States for work, and deliberately going out and talking to people about politics and that kind of thing. And it has been surprising in many ways. I knew that Americans were friendly, and I've experienced friendly Americans so many times before, but they are so excited to talk about politics with you, which is, very different to Australia, obviously. And so I feel like I've got a lot more insight into why one result or another might happen. And I've got a lot of insight into, if Donald Trump wins, then I feel like I could understand why many of his supporters, got out there and wanted him to win and made it happen. Similarly with Harris, I can understand why Harris could win, but I have no particular insight into which of those two things is more likely. But I think I have a better understanding about why each of those things may happen.
Yeah. It's the kind of beauty and the horror of America, is that you can never really know, which is probably a very unsatisfying way to end this last night before the election conversation, but that's where we'll leave it.
Well, the one thing that I would say is it's incredible how normal everyone is being, given the gravity of the election that is happening tomorrow. I think a lot of Australians are really paying a lot of attention to this and talking a lot about it, but everyone is just going about their business, and talking about it from time to time, but it's not dominating every single conversation, which is, incredible for me, because the gravity of the election tomorrow is so great. That the fact that all these people, we're sitting across from a guy who's watching a basketball game, and his friend is working on a spreadsheet, and which is great, that's fine. But if it was me, and I am me, I would be paying entire attention to one thing and one thing only. And so, it's fascinating being here and seeing that most people, they've got better things on than paying attention to tomorrow's election.
Yeah, which is hard to relate to, as you say, but I think it is that kind of hot mess of, we saw so many so deeply engaged people just earlier in Philadelphia, and then, alongside that, there's this kind of mix of complacency and powerlessness as well.
Well, a few streets away from the rally queue, this unbelievably massive rally queue, there was no particular buzz about politics at the Indian restaurant, and, people just going about their business. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a country of many contradictions. Now, I said I was going to end this about 5 minutes ago, so we will leave it there. Matt Bevan, thank you so much for your time and for letting me tag along with you to Philadelphia.
You are very welcome. It's been a delight to have you here, Emma.
This episode was recorded on Monday, the 4th of November, US time. Nobody knows what might have happened since then. If you're enjoying After America, please help us spread the word by telling your friends about the show. You can find us on social media. We are at the Oz Institute, that's with an AUS, on Twitter and Instagram. And you can reach out to us with feedback and episode ideas via our email address, which is podcasts@australiainstitute.org.au. Our music is from Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Emma Shortis. See you on the other side.